They say most betrayals are whispered. But this one was practically broadcasted, right there by the hors d'oeuvres table, while someone's kid spilled grape juice on the patio pavers. It was a warm Saturday afternoon, late spring. The kind of day where the breeze felt curated, where the sun wasn't too sharp yet still caught on every glass rim like a spotlight. Tessa's garden party had all the markings of suburban grace: white paper lanterns strung through the oak trees, too many throw pillows on the lawn chairs, and a playlist of soft jazz humming beneath the clink of wine glasses. And there I was, folding chair number 9, tucked neatly under the shade of an umbrella, like a decorative extra. The line came out of Tessa's mouth in a tone too bright to be anything but malicious. "I swear, if I get one more wrinkle, I'll need a whole new face. Like Mark's mom. Sorry, Linda, but Botox missed your zip code." Laughter. Not shocked silence. Not gasps. Laughter. Sharp, wine-soaked, and loud. Someone spilled Prosecco from laughing too hard. One of her friends slapped her arm in mock scandal, and another added, "No, stop, you're awful." But no one said, "That's not okay." No one turned toward me. "Not even Mark!" He chuckled, my own son, and muttered, "She's always been a little sensitive." That's when I realized it wasn't a joke. It wasn't a slip. It was a performance, and I was the punchline. I didn't flinch. Didn't let the sting bloom across my face, even as my cheeks burned. I took a slow sip of my lemonade. Yes, lemonade, because Tessa always accidentally forgot I liked red wine, and stood. I made sure the plastic chair didn't scrape the concrete. I smiled at no one in particular, walked through the crowd, and headed inside. The kitchen was empty, save for a tray of half-wilted cucumber sandwiches and a fruit bowl with too much honeydew. I set my cup down by the sink, turned on the faucet, and rinsed my hands. Slowly, methodically, like I was washing away something that couldn't be seen. The party murmured behind me, clinking, giggling, music swelling like a wave that refused to crash. I stared at my reflection in the glass cabinet. My curls had frizzed a bit in the humidity. My lipstick had worn off from lunch. The lines around my mouth looked deeper under fluorescent light. I whispered, "Wrinkled, huh?" and let it hang there. There was no one to hear it but me. I went upstairs to the guest room, the one that used to be mine before I voluntarily moved into the smaller room near the garage. It had become the seasonal overflow space, gift wrap tubes in the closet, an exercise bike that hadn't moved since New Year's. I opened the bottom drawer of the nightstand and touched the edge of the red folder I kept tucked inside. Still there. Still mine. I didn't take it out. Not yet. That would come later. For now, I just wanted to sit with the weight of it, knowing what they didn't. The house was in my name. Not Mark's, not Tessa's, mine. When my husband George passed, we refinanced. I paid off the last of the mortgage with a lump sum from my retirement after Mark lost his job, and they temporarily moved in. The idea was simple: we'd live together until they got back on their feet. I'd be surrounded by family. I'd be useful, loved. That was 5 years ago. Useful, maybe. Loved? Laughed at. I closed the drawer gently and walked back downstairs. "Everything okay, Linda?" Tessa's voice sang from across the living room. She had her hostess smile on, all teeth and fake warmth. I nodded. Just needed a moment. Got a bit warm. "Of course," she said, like she hadn't just crucified me with compliments about her skincare routine. Mark looked up from his phone but said nothing. He'd always had Tessa's back, even when it came at the cost of my dignity. "I'll just sit over there," I said, pointing to the far edge of the yard near the fence line. Tessa waved me off. "Make yourself at home." I almost laughed. Home. That night, after the last guest had filtered out and the solar lanterns dimmed, I stood in the doorway of my room, the small dim one with no closet, and watched Mark load folding chairs into the shed. Tessa was already inside, probably removing her false lashes and counting likes on her latest post. I wanted to say something. Anything. But I didn't. I let the silence stretch between us. That's when I realized the difference between being quiet and being silenced. I wasn't going to beg for grace in a home I paid for. I wasn't going to correct her cruelty with a timid laugh and a smile. And I sure as hell wasn't going to age quietly, just because it made someone else uncomfortable. Instead, I started packing. Just one box, just to see how it felt. My hands didn't tremble, not once. They'd thought I'd forget. Instead, I started planning. The funny thing about humiliation is that it doesn't always sting right away. It lingers, like perfume on an old scarf or garlic on your fingertips the next morning. It follows you into the mundane, makes you look twice at your reflection when you're brushing your teeth, question your memory when you reread old birthday cards. That night, I couldn't sleep. Tessa's words replayed in my mind like a catchy song I never wanted to learn the lyrics to. The laughter, the way Mark dismissed me with a chuckle, it all circled the ceiling like moths too fast to catch, too persistent to ignore. So I got up, slipped on my robe. My old joints creaked the way the floorboards used to in the house George and I first bought back when we had barely enough for a down payment and still thought shag carpet was a luxury. I made a cup of tea, quiet as I could. Tessa said the kettle was too loud in the mornings, as if boiling water should be ashamed of itself. I sat at the kitchen table and looked around the room, stainless steel appliances, marble countertops, modern, cold, perfect, the kind of kitchen you find in catalogs, staged and soulless. I remembered what it used to look like before the renovations. The kitchen still had that honey-colored wood George had refinished himself. We argued for a week about whether to stain or paint. I wanted white, he wanted the wood to breathe. He won, and he was right. It had warmth then. Now it looked like a place where feelings were filtered out with the water. I sipped my tea and let myself go back to when this was a home, not a showroom. Mark was born in that house, not this one, the old one. The first one, 2 bedrooms, creaky plumbing, a backyard so small I had to plant tomatoes in buckets. George and I took turns waking up with the baby. He always said, "Go sleep, Linda, I've got the night shift." And then I'd find him asleep on the floor next to the crib with a baby bottle tipped sideways like a white flag. We made it work, always. Even when the money was tight, when the economy dipped, when George was laid off for 9 months straight, I picked up nursing shifts like a machine. Doubles, weekends, night float. I missed birthdays, but I never missed rent. And when George got sick, well, that's when things changed. The diagnosis was fast. Pancreatic. By the time we understood it, we were already bracing for goodbye. I took a leave of absence to care for him. I sold the second car, canceled the vacation we were planning for our 35th anniversary, and stopped buying new clothes altogether. My wardrobe froze in time the day his pain started. We refinanced the house to cover the hospice costs. Mark was finishing grad school at the time. Tessa was still just a girlfriend then. Bright smile, city dreams, always calling him babe, like his name was too heavy to carry. When George passed, I didn't cry at the funeral, not until everyone left. I just stood at the front of the church, clutching the folded flag from his service and trying to remember how to breathe without him next to me. The house felt like a tomb after that, silent, cold. I kept the thermostat low because I couldn't justify the bill for just me. I ate soup from cans and talked to the photo of George on the mantel like he was on a business trip and just overdue for a call. Mark visited less and less. He said work was overwhelming, that Tessa was managing a new team and needed support. I understood. I always understood. Then the flood hit their apartment. They called in a panic, voices overlapping, asking if they could just stay a few weeks. Of course, I said yes. Of course, I cooked their favorite meals, cleared out the guest room, and even boxed up George's books to make space. That's when Mark brought up selling the old house. We'd be better off with something more modern, he'd said. Easier resale value down the line, fewer repairs. I hesitated, but he pressed, said it was practical, said it was for our future. Tessa hugged me when I agreed, her tone syrupy sweet. "You're amazing, Linda. You'll always have a place with us." That was 5 years ago. The new house was bigger, shinier, emptier. They handled the closing, but I signed the papers. All of them. My name, the only one on the title. I paid off what remained of the mortgage from George's life insurance and moved in with nothing but boxes of memories and my mother's china set they never once used. For the first few months, I believed we were a family again. I cooked. I cleaned. I folded their laundry without being asked. I didn't want thanks. I wanted proximity. I wanted the sound of footsteps above me. I wanted life near me, even if it didn't need me. But over time, that changed. The smiles turned tight. The gratitude faded. The space I once carved out for them began to shrink around me. First, it was the bedroom swap. Then the jokes about clutter. Then the fridge shelf that became off limits because of Tessa's meal prep. And finally, this. A party where my wrinkles became a punchline. I finished my tea, cold now, and placed the mug in the dishwasher. I looked out the window. The string lights still hung above the patio like little glowing lies. They thought I was just an old woman too tired to push back. But I wasn't tired. I was ready. It didn't start with insults. It never does. Disrespect doesn't kick down the front door. It lets itself in quietly, takes off its shoes, and sits at your table like it belongs there. By the time you notice it, it's already using your good plates. After George died and I sold the old house, the move here was pitched like a dream. Tessa called it a fresh chapter, said I could have the downstairs bedroom so I wouldn't have to worry about stairs. Mark assured me I'd never have to cook or clean again. "We've got it, Mom," he said, patting my hand like I was made of glass. But habits die hard. Within a week, I found myself sweeping the kitchen floor, folding laundry, refilling the soap dispenser before it ran out. I didn't mind. It felt like contributing, like I still had purpose. But then came the thermostat. One morning, I walked into the living room and found a sleek white device mounted on the wall with a tiny screen and no buttons. When I asked about it, Tessa waved her hand dismissively and said, "It's smart. You don't need to touch it. It learns." "I just wanted to turn the heat up a little," I said, rubbing my arms. "Well, we're trying to reduce energy use," she replied, already walking away. Next came the fridge. It was subtle at first. A little sticky note on the top shelf that said, "Meal prep, please don't move." I didn't, but the next week, the note was replaced with a clear plastic bin labeled Tessa only. Then a lock. Yes, a lock. On the second fridge upstairs, the one where they kept their health stuff, Tessa said it was for safety, just in case things get mixed up. I didn't say anything. Instead, I took to eating in my room more often. Toast, fruit, a microwaved bowl of oatmeal. Quiet. Then, the modem disappeared. The small black box that had been in the living room, plugged in behind the TV, vanished overnight. I asked Mark where it went. "Oh, I moved it upstairs. Tessa needed a stronger connection for her Zooms." He said, "You still get Wi-Fi downstairs, right?" I nodded, though my shows had been buffering for 3 days. Every time I tried to watch a documentary or a cooking video, the little circle spun in the middle of the screen like it was trying to hypnotize me into giving up. So I did. I sat on the edge of my bed one evening and stared at my reflection in the dark screen. My curls had flattened on one side. I didn't have the energy to fix them. My cardigan smelled faintly of bleach from folding laundry that wasn't mine. I used to have a routine: tea at 7, a walk at 8, a book by 10. Now I floated between hours like a ghost in a place I used to call home. The worst part wasn't the cold thermostat or the locked fridge. It was the sound of them living without me. Laughter upstairs, music I didn't recognize, conversations I wasn't invited into. I would hear Tessa talking to her friends on speakerphone while she cooked. "She's sweet, but it's like having a live-in antique. Mark's mom, she means well, just doesn't get boundaries." One night, as I passed the kitchen, I heard her say, "Eventually, she'll have to leave. We need the space. A nursery needs light, not mothballs." Mark chuckled in response. "Don't worry, she'll get tired of it, or bored." That's when it clicked. This wasn't a home. It was a waiting room. And I wasn't family. I was furniture. They weren't being forgetful. They were planning my disappearance. After that, I started noticing the little changes faster. My detergent was replaced with a cleaner scent. My teacups were moved to a higher cabinet. Tessa brought home an air purifier and set it outside my room, because the downstairs can get stuffy. I began spending more time in silence, not because I had nothing to say, but because I wanted to hear the shape of their intentions. One morning, I made pancakes. From scratch, just like I used to when Mark was little, back when he'd run into the kitchen in mismatched socks and ask for smiley face ones. I even added blueberries in the shape of a smile. He came downstairs, grabbed a protein bar from the counter, and said, "Oh, I'm intermittent fasting." Tessa wrinkled her nose at the stack of pancakes. "That smells nostalgic." I watched them walk out the door without a second glance. The syrup bottle still had the seal on it. That night, I packed a second box. This time, with books. Old ones. George's favorites. My tattered copy of A Tree Grows in Brooklyn. A few letters I hadn't been able to throw away. I placed the box in the trunk of my car. No one noticed. They never noticed. I stopped keeping my cardigan folded. That was the first sign something inside me had shifted. I've always been the sort who tidies as I go. A clean cup in the sink, I'd rinse and put it away. A cardigan over the back of a chair, I'd fold it, smooth the sleeves, and lay it gently at the foot of the bed. But that morning, after the pancake rejection, after hearing Tessa describe me as alive and antique, I let it stay where it was, draped and slouched, and wrinkled, just like. It was barely 7 when I shuffled into the downstairs bathroom and caught sight of myself in the mirror. Harsh light, yellow edges, cracked tile. The mirror was small, a square thing mounted too high, the kind that gives you half your face unless you stretch. I looked up. Not quickly, not with curiosity, with dread. And there she was, me. My curls were uneven, flattened from sleep on one side, frizzy on the other. My eyes had that soft hollowness that comes from sleeping too little and thinking too much. I leaned closer and ran a finger over the fine lines around my mouth. Wrinkles, Tessa's word. I didn't hate them. I didn't even feel embarrassed. I felt tired. Tired of being measured by skin elasticity and whether my arms jiggled when I reached for the salt. I turned on the tap and splashed cold water on my face, watching the droplets slide down each ridge of my aging skin. Every groove told a story: laughter, grief, nights holding George's hand when the morphine wasn't enough. I whispered to my reflection, "You've earned every single one." And yet they mocked them. Reduced my years to a punchline. At a party. My legacy, my labor, my love summed up as expired. A few hours later, I sat at the edge of my bed with the red folder open on my lap. I hadn't touched it since the move. It was dusty at the edges, but the documents inside were crisp, neat. Deed, insurance statements, tax forms, everything with my name alone on the line, where it mattered. Mark didn't even know the full extent of what I still owned. I'd kept it vague on purpose. That was the only advice George ever gave me when it came to money. Love your kids, but don't hand them the checkbook. Not until they've earned the pen. I ran my finger under the signature line. Linda May Costas. Clear, legible, still mine. In the corner of the room, the printer hummed quietly. To life. I'd printed a few things the night before: rental listings, storage unit availability, mailing change of address forms. I had started preparing, not to threaten them, not for drama, for dignity. After lunch, if you can call a half sandwich and awkward silence a meal, I asked Mark if we could talk. He didn't look up from his laptop. What's up? I was thinking about taking a little trip. Oh? Tessa chimed in from across the room. She was seated cross-legged on the floor, folding laundry with one eye on her phone. Where to? Just a few nights away. I found a motel near the coast. Mark smiled without really smiling. That sounds nice. Tessa didn't respond. Her silence said more than words. I went back to my room, packed a small overnight bag, and left the red folder where they wouldn't find it, wedged behind the extra blankets in the linen closet. Just for. I didn't take much. 2 changes of clothes. My toothbrush. A paperback. I never finished. I paused at the vanity and almost grabbed my face cream, then remembered the locked fridge, the cold shoulders, the Botox jokes. I left the cream behind. Before I walked out the door, I did one more thing. I wrote a note, not a dramatic one, not a declaration of war, just a small folded square slipped beneath Mark's coffee mug. Gone to get some air. Don't wait up. I drove with the windows down, letting the wind tangle what was left of my curls. I didn't turn on the radio. The silence felt like something sacred, like I'd been underwater for too long and had finally come up for breath. The motel wasn't glamorous, but it had a real key. Not a plastic card. The carpet was faded, the curtains smelled like soap, the window faced a parking lot. Still, it was mine, just for a night, just for a start. I set my bag on the chair and walked straight to the bathroom. Another mirror, this one longer, more honest. I looked again, and this time, I smiled. Not a wide grin, not a triumphant smirk, just the kind of smile that says, I remember who I am, and I'm not done yet. When I got home the next afternoon, No one was there. The house was still. Tessa's yoga mat was unrolled in the corner of the living room, her reusable water bottle beside it. The air smelled like lemon cleaner, and silence. I walked through the front hallway slowly, the soles of my shoes sticking slightly to the tile where someone had just mopped, probably Tessa. She always cleaned with that overly bright energy, like the smell of productivity might erase the tension thickening between us. My overnight bag was still in my hand when I stepped into my room. I didn't even sit down. I went straight to the linen closet. The red folder was exactly where I left it, wedged behind the extra blankets, slightly bent but untouched. I pulled it out and sat on the edge of the bed, exhaling so slowly it almost sounded like a whisper. The thing about holding your entire future in your lap is that it doesn't feel like power. It feels like pressure, like you're balancing your past on one knee and your dignity on the other. I flipped the folder open and pulled out the deed. My name, not just on its sole owner. That was the part they never paid attention to. When we sold the old house and bought this one, Mark assumed we'd done everything jointly. He was so busy handling closing logistics that he never asked who actually signed the checks. It was my name on the cashier's check, my name on the wire transfer, my name alone on the legal paperwork. They hadn't noticed because they never asked. I wasn't involved in anything important until now. I reread the title line, the mortgage record, the clause George had insisted we add years ago when we first began planning our estate. It was subtle, legalese buried deep in the pages, but it was clear. In the event of sole survivor ownership, all authority reverts to the named individual until such time a legal transfer is executed. Translation, they had no rights unless I gave them some. And I hadn't. Not one. I pulled out a yellow legal pad and started writing. It wasn't a manifesto, just a list. Things to transfer. Accounts to close. Calls to make. I wrote slowly, deliberately, like every letter was proof of something they tried to erase. Storage unit. Already reserved. PO box, set up tomorrow. Utilities. Contact by Friday. Realtor, schedule meeting. Every checkmark gave me another breath of air. I didn't need to yell. I didn't need to slam doors or raise my voice. I had a pen. That was enough. Later that evening, Mark came home first. I heard the door creak open and the soft thud of his shoes on the hardwood. I didn't come out. I stayed in my room, folder closed, list folded neatly beside it. He knocked. "Hey, Mom?" "Yes? You okay?" Tessa said. "You went out of town?" "I did." He hesitated, probably expecting more. When I didn't offer it, he cleared his throat. "Everything okay?" "Getting there," I said. He paused. "Dinner's in the fridge if you want." I smiled, but not at him, at how little he still understood. "Thanks." The door shut gently. I didn't hear from him again that night. Instead, I went online. There's a kind of peace in browsing property listings while your family assumes you're folding laundry. The places weren't fancy. Small rentals, guest houses, senior condos with cheerful beige walls. But they were mine to choose. No twin beds shoved in corners. No whispered comments about meal prep or Wi-Fi passwords. Just blank spaces waiting for someone like me to fill them. One caught my eye. A little studio on the edge of a nearby town. Big window. Hardwood floors, no stairs. Available immediately. I saved the listing and printed the application. I took my time filling it out. I used a pen with a comfortable grip, the kind you don't lend to anyone. I wrote in block letters, slow and legible. Employment status, retired. Monthly income, enough. References, none of your business. I placed the completed application in the red folder beside the deed. It sat there like a loaded slingshot, quiet, small, precise. They wouldn't see it coming. But they would feel it. And maybe, just maybe, they'd finally understand that the wrinkles on my face weren't signs of weakness. They were survival lines, proof I'd made it this far. Alone, if necessary. Let them laugh. I had signatures. For the next few days, I became a ghost in my own house, moving softly, listening more than speaking, absorbing everything they weren't trying to hide. Tessa had started leaving pamphlets on the counter. Not accidentally. Strategically. Brochures for skincare regimens, senior fitness programs, active adult communities. She didn't hand them to me. Just left them there. like bait. One had a woman on the cover who looked like me, only airbrushed and airheaded, stretching toward the sun in a peach-colored tracksuit with the words "Rediscover Your Glow" below her. I dropped that one in the trash, quietly, without comment. On Thursday, I walked into the kitchen and overheard Mark talking on the phone. He didn't lower his voice. "Once we get the equity sorted, we can finally do the kitchen expansion." "Yeah, she's still here, but it's temporary." I didn't interrupt. I stood by the edge of the hallway, just far enough to be out of sight, just close enough to hear the words fall out of his mouth, like crumbs he didn't plan to sweep up. Temporary. Me, in my own home, a placeholder. Later that evening, Tessa came in with shopping bags full of seasonal throw pillows and fake eucalyptus stems. I was folding laundry in the living room, sorting their towels by color out of sheer muscle memory. "Oh, Linda," she said, pausing to give me her version of a smile. "Could you maybe not use the dryer for your clothes this weekend? I have a delicate load, and we're running the new energy monitoring thingy. You know, for the carbon points." I nodded without looking at her. "Of course." "Great, you're a lifesaver." "No, just the unpaid, unthanked house ghost." That night, I did something small, something that might have seemed meaningless to anyone else. I unplugged my old sewing machine from the closet and cleaned it. I hadn't touched it in years. The dust was thick, the foot pedal stiff, the needle rusted dull. I cleaned it until it gleamed again, like a forgotten part of me had blinked away. Then I stitched a single hem on a pillowcase, just to feel the thread move under my fingers, just to remind myself I could still make things. The next day, I called the storage facility and confirmed my unit was ready. It was a dusty place on the edge of town. Metal rows, gravel lot, one overworked man behind a cracked plexiglass window. I used a false name. Not because I needed to, just because it made me feel like I still had secrets worth keeping. I dropped off 2 boxes, the first with books and letters, the second with George's keepsakes and a small jewelry box. Nothing of real value, except to me. When I returned, Tessa was in the living room with a realtor. She didn't flinch when I walked in. "Oh, hi," she chirped. "This is Megan. She's just giving us a consult on the market value of the property." I raised an eyebrow. I don't remember signing off on that. Mark walked in just then, rubbing the back of his neck. "It's just preliminary, Mom. Nothing's happening yet." I turned to the realtor. "You're aware this house is under a sole deed, correct?" Megan glanced between us. I was told it was co-owned." "No," I said calmly. "It's not." Silence. Mark opened his mouth, but I beat him to it. "I'll let you all finish," I said, turning toward the hallway. "But don't forget to factor in sudden departures. They affect market value." That night, the air in the house was thick enough to cut. Mark didn't say much. Tessa was quieter than usual, though her footsteps upstairs were sharper, faster, agitated. I moved like smoke. I printed a change of address confirmation. I scheduled the utilities to be terminated in my name next week. I left a new set of blank keys on the counter, labeled for new tenant. I wasn't just leaving. I was extracting myself, like a surgeon pulling thread from a stitched wound. And as I packed a 3rd box, this one with my kitchen items, my favorite mug, my chipped cutting board, I realized I hadn't felt this light in years. Not since George. Not since the last time someone asked me how I wanted to spend a Sunday. No one in this house ever asked me anything that didn't end with "would you mind?" Yes, I minded. But they never noticed. And now they wouldn't notice me leaving either, not until the cushion still held the shape of my absence. Sunday morning arrived with a false calm. The kind that drapes itself over a house like fog, soft at first, then suffocating. I woke early, before the coffee machine kicked on, before Tessa's playlist started their usual warbling through the Bluetooth speakers. I moved quietly through the kitchen, placed a kettle on the stove, my old metal one that squeals when it boils, and pulled out a notepad. There was only one thing left to do. Make the terms clear. Not out of spite, not even revenge, just closure. Legal, binding, written proof that I was stepping out on my own terms and taking the rug right out from under their plans. When the water boiled, I poured the tea and carried the cup to the dining table. I didn't turn on any lights. The morning sun was enough, gold and low and slightly slanted across the floorboards, like a spotlight aimed at the truth. I laid out the red folder. Beside it, I placed the rental application copy, the utility transfer confirmations, and a letter with 3 words at the top in bold ink. Notice of intent. I wrote it myself, no lawyer needed. I, Linda May Costas, sole owner of the property located at. I wrote it slowly, each word like a slow drum beat in my chest. The rest followed. Effective in 2 weeks. I'd be vacating the premises. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. Because I deserved peace. And because I no longer saw the point in maintaining a home where my presence was either mocked or ignored. The final paragraph, though, that was the one that mattered most. This property, which remains under my name alone, is being placed on the market. All residents must vacate within 45 days of official listing or submit a formal rental application. No preferential treatment will be offered. Rent will be market standard. It was cold, professional, not dramatic, but it would land. Like thunder. They wanted equity. They could apply, like everyone else. I had just folded the letter when Mark walked in. He was rubbing the sleep from his eyes, wearing his usual disheveled Saturday look, sweatpants, mismatched socks, and a shirt from some tech conference he probably hadn't actually attended. He blinked when he saw me at the table. "Morning," he said. "Morning," I echoed, calm and light. He walked over to the fridge, grabbed the almond milk, and turned toward me. "You're up early." I had something to finalize. He looked at the table, eyes landing briefly on the red folder, then flicking back up like he didn't want to ask. But he did. "What's all that?" "Paperwork." His brows lifted. For the future." He gave a soft, nervous laugh. "That sounds ominous." "It's just overdue," I said. "Things I should have done years ago." He hesitated. "Everything okay, Mom?"
Yes.
I said, for the first time in a long while. He looked like he wanted to say more, but Tessa padded in from the hallway, wrapped in a silk robe and already scrolling through her phone. "Oh," she said when she noticed the folder. "What's this?" "House business," I said, and then, for good measure, owner business. She stopped moving. I pushed the folder slightly forward. "You're both welcome to read it." Mark stepped closer and opened the top flap. I watched his eyes move, his pupils adjusting not to the light, but to the weight of the truth landing on his shoulders. He read silently. Tessa hovered behind him, reading over his shoulder. When he got to the rental application clause, his mouth parted slightly. "You're selling." I nodded. "I am. But where will you go?" "I already have a place." Tessa broke in. "Wait. What about us?" I met her eyes. "What about you?" "We live here," she said, laughing, awkwardly. "You can't just." "I can," I said softly. "And I am. This isn't a punishment, it's a correction." Mark looked stunned. "Mom, you thought I didn't know what was going on. You thought I was just some old woman clinging to spare rooms and silent favors. But I was paying attention. And I've earned the right to choose who shares my space." Tessa scoffed. "So you're kicking us out?" "I'm giving you the option," I said. "Apply, like anyone else. If you qualify, maybe the next owner will want you." Mark sat down heavily. "We were going to talk to you about buying the place eventually." I gave a small, tired smile. "No, you weren't." He looked down. "You were hoping I'd die quietly," I added, not cruelly, just plainly, "and leave it all to you like an inheritance. But the truth is, I died a little every time you let her mock me and said nothing." No one spoke. The kettle whistled faintly from where I'd left it, though it had long since gone cold. I stood, gathered the documents, and slid them back into the folder. "I'll be gone by the end of the week. A realtor will contact you soon." Tessa stepped back like she'd been slapped. Mark looked at me with something like grief, not for me, but for what he thought he lost. And he had. Not a house, a mother. The strangest part about taking back control isn't the noise, it's the quiet. You expect shouting. You brace for arguments, slammed doors, maybe even guilt-laced apologies, but none of that came. After I handed over the folder and told them the truth, the house fell into a strange, breathless stillness. No one yelled. No one begged. Tessa spent the afternoon in their bedroom. I could hear her pacing sometimes, her voice clipped as she spoke into her phone, probably to friends, spinning a story about how I'd lost it. She was always good at crafting narratives where she was the misunderstood one. Mark avoided me altogether. He didn't even look me in the eye that night, at dinner. Not that we ate together. He ordered Thai takeout and brought it upstairs without a word. I stayed in the kitchen and made myself a grilled cheese sandwich, just like I used to when money was tight and comfort had to be melted between two slices of bread. I ate in silence, chewing slowly, listening to the creaks and hums of the house. This structure that had held us all, even while we were busy pretending we weren't tearing it down. After I rinsed my plate, I went back to my room and pulled out the one thing I hadn't packed yet, the wedding photo. It was the last one of us as a family before the rot took hold. Mark in a tux that didn't quite fit, Tessa in her white dress, already giving that fixed smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, and me, off to the side, one hand on my clutch, the other folded awkwardly in front of my stomach like I wasn't sure I belonged in the frame. Even then, I had been an accessory, not a participant, just someone to complete the picture. I stared at the photo until my eyes blurred. Then I slid it into an envelope and labeled it, for later, if they asked, because one day they would. I spent the next morning boxing up the rest of my things. I worked steadily, deliberately. My hands didn't tremble. I knew exactly what to take and what to leave. The china set my mother gave me, staying. Tessa always hated it, said it looked outdated. My sewing kit, packed. The blanket I knit when Mark was a baby, the one they used for their dog when I moved in, packed. The mail came at noon, a confirmation letter from the realtor, listing photos scheduled for Tuesday. I smiled. The thought of strangers walking through the house, admiring the floors I scrubbed, the walls I painted, made me feel strangely vindicated. Let them try to sell it without me. Let them learn that a house is more than bricks. It's the hands that built it, the soul that warmed it. And I was taking that with me. Tessa finally came downstairs that afternoon, dressed like she was headed to brunch with people who'd never ask how she really felt. Her lips were pressed into a line. She didn't greet me. Instead, she walked into the kitchen and started rearranging the spice rack, one of her passive-aggressive habits, like a silent protest against the way I liked things organized. "Something you want to say?" I asked, folding the tape on another box. She turned. "You didn't have to blindside us." "I didn't," I said. "I left every sign in plain view. You just didn't look. We thought we were helping you." "No," I corrected. "You thought you were tolerating me. There's a difference." She scoffed, brushing a stray hair behind her ear. "So what now? You live in some cramped little apartment like a mart?" I smiled, just slightly. "No. I live in peace." She rolled her eyes. "It's dramatic. It's overdue." She didn't respond, just picked up her phone and walked out of the room. I didn't follow her. I had nothing left to prove. That night, I sat by the window in my room and watched the sun dip behind the row of houses. The sky was smeared in oranges and purples, like a child's drawing. I used to love sunsets. With George, we'd sit on the porch and sip tea and speak in that comfortable hush only two people who've seen each other at their worst can share. I closed my eyes and whispered, "I did it. Love." In my mind, I imagined him. The listing went live on a Sunday morning. By Monday afternoon, the phone was ringing non-stop. The realtor texted me, 3 interested parties already, first showing Tuesday at noon. Are you comfortable stepping out for an hour or two? I laughed. I was more than comfortable. I was counting down the minutes. Mark didn't say a word. He saw the listing open on Tessa's laptop. My face not in the photos, but my fingerprints on every surface. The neat linen curtains, the refurbished kitchen cabinets I painted by hand, the polished wood banister. George and I once argued about staining too dark. Now it would be paraded in front of strangers like a prize they assumed was already theirs. Tessa was livid. "This is humiliating," she said to Mark while I pretended not to hear. "We have to clean for strangers now. Our stuff's everywhere. I don't want them touching my things." Mark responded flatly, "It's not your house." The silence that followed was exquisite. I left early on Tuesday. I had already packed what mattered. The boxes were stacked in my car's trunk like soldiers ready for orders. I had just one more to add. A small, square one, labeled office. Inside was the original rental application. I didn't need it anymore. I'd been approved. My new address, keys, and first month's rent were already processed. I'd picked a modest studio in a quiet neighborhood just past the city line. Nothing fancy, but it had light, space, quiet, a window that faced trees, not walls. I'd already walked the block twice and introduced myself to the lady next door who watered her porch plants every morning at 8. She called me darling. I nearly cried. At 11:45 a.m., I pulled out of the driveway and drove to a small cafe nearby. I chose a table outside, ordered a slice of pie and a cup of chamomile tea, and waited for the hour to pass. I watched people walk their dogs, chase their toddlers, argue over who ordered the oat milk. No one knew me. No one expected anything from me. I was free. At 1:10 p.m., I returned. There were still 3 cars parked in front of the house. 2 couples and 1 solo man. I recognized the realtor's SUV. Through the open front door, I saw one of the couples admiring the bay window, my window where I had watched over Mark when he first learned to ride a bike. I didn't feel sadness. I felt relief. I waited in the car until they were done, sipping the rest of my tea and watching a bird hop along the edge of the sidewalk. By the time the last visitor left, the sun had shifted and the house looked smaller. Or maybe I'd just grown. The realtor approached my car window, smiling. "Strong interest already," she said. "2 said they're submitting offers today." I nodded. "Good. I'll keep you updated." "You do that." When I walked back into the house, it felt like I'd returned to a theater after the final curtain. The stage was still set, but the actors were gone. Tessa had retreated upstairs. Mark was in the living room, arms crossed, staring blankly at the wall. "You really went through with it," he said. "I told you I would." He turned slowly to face me. "This isn't how families handle things." "No," I said. "This is how adults handle things when they've been dismissed, overlooked and disrespected for too long." He shook his head. "You could have talked to us." "I did," I said. "You just weren't listening." He looked like he wanted to argue, but there were no points left to score. The referee had already left the building. I set my purse down and said, "The buyers will need occupancy within 60 days. I'll be out this weekend. I suggest you start looking too." "Where are you going?" he asked, almost whispering. "Somewhere quiet. Somewhere kind." He looked away. That silence again. The kind that comes when you realize you've been a guest in a life you thought you owned. Before I went back to my room, I placed a small slip of paper on the hallway table. It read, "For rent inquiries, contact the realtor. I suggest you do it quickly." Then I closed the door behind me. I packed my last box on a Thursday morning, just as the sky cracked open and poured the first rain of the season. It was soft rain, the kind that taps on the windows instead of pounding, the kind that says this is the end of something, but not the end of you. I liked that. I'd always felt more alive in quiet weather. The room was nearly empty now. Just the mattress, the old chair I'd claimed as mine, and the box labeled Final, Fragile. Inside were 3 framed photographs, my tea mug, and a note George wrote me on our 40th anniversary. The paper had yellowed. The ink had bled slightly at the edges from age or tears. I'm not sure which. I taped the box slowly, double-checked the corners, then sat on the edge of the mattress and exhaled. It didn't feel like I was leaving a home. It felt like I was shedding skin. Tessa was in the hallway when I stepped out with the box. Her arms were crossed. She hadn't spoken to me since the listing went up. "I saw the ad," she said flatly. "The house already has a pending offer." "Yes," I said. "Things move fast when they're handled by someone competent." She scowled. "You're really doing this." "I've already done it." "You're leaving Mark homeless." "No," I corrected. "I'm leaving Mark responsible. There's a difference." She didn't move from the hallway. "He's your son." "And I was his mother," I said, "not his maid. Not his backup plan. Not his property manager." She flinched slightly at that. I didn't stop. I raised him. I buried his father. I stayed long past when I was respected. And now I'm done. "Where are you even going?" she demanded, like I owed her that. "To peace," I said simply. "You wouldn't like it. It's quiet and no one talks about Wrinkles at dinner parties." She muttered something under her breath and stepped aside. I walked past her with the box in my arms, heart steady, breath clean. Mark was in the garage, standing by the water heater like he was hiding. He looked up when he heard me set the box down near the door. "You don't have to go," he said. "Yes, I do." He sighed. "Tessa's just stressed." "No," I replied. "She's entitled. There's a difference. And you let it fester until it soured both of you." He rubbed the back of his neck like he always did when he was about to deflect. We thought you were happy here. No, I said. You hoped I was silent. He didn't argue. That told me everything. I opened the car trunk and began loading the final box. He stood beside me for a while, hands in his pockets, unsure of whether he should hug me or let me go. I saved him the trouble. You were once the best part of my life, I said. Don't let her be the worst. Then I closed the trunk, got in the driver's seat, and pulled away. I didn't look back. The drive to my new place was quiet. The rain tapered off as I left the suburbs behind. I passed familiar shops, the library where I used to take Mark every Saturday, the bakery George loved for their oatmeal cookies. None of it hurt. I had let the pain rot into something useful, a foundation for a future they would no longer be part of. My new apartment was modest, but warm. The super had left a welcome note and a box of chamomile tea. The window faced a small park, and when I opened it, I could hear the faint laughter of children playing somewhere nearby. I set the final box down on the kitchen counter and took a breath. No footsteps upstairs, no muttered complaints about thermostat settings, no jokes about my senior moments. Just stillness and space, and my name alone on the lease. I unpacked slowly. My tea mug first, then the photographs, then George's letter, which I slid into a small frame and placed on the windowsill. Then I brewed a cup of tea and stood by the window, steam rising around my face as I watched the sky begin to clear. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt whole. It took me 3 days to settle in, not because there was so much to unpack, but because I kept pausing to take it all in. The quiet hum of my new fridge, the way the afternoon sun spilled across the hardwood floors, the way I no longer flinched at the sound of footsteps because they were mine alone. Each small task, putting away plates, organizing drawers, folding blankets, felt like reclaiming something. My time, my space, my voice. On the 4th day, I opened the community center bulletin board and signed up for a watercolor class. I hadn't painted since 1986, when George and I tried a weekend art retreat and ended up laughing more than painting. I signed my name with a blue ink pen, the kind that glides, not scratches. I circled the start date. Next Monday, 10 a.m. class limit. I liked that. Small group, no pressure. I bought myself a new mug from a thrift store down the street. It had a chip on the handle and a hand-painted daffodil on the front. It looked like something forgotten, but still trying to bloom. That night, I made soup from scratch and listened to an old record, Billie Holiday, crackling with history, and danced a little in the kitchen. Just a slow sway, nothing dramatic. Freedom doesn't come with a parade. It comes with ordinary joy. That's what I was learning. So when the knock came at the door on Saturday afternoon, it startled me. Not because I was afraid, just because I wasn't expecting anyone. And more than that, because I had forgotten what it felt like to brace myself before opening a door. When I pulled it open, Mark stood on the other side, soaked from the rain, hair flattened to his forehead, a grocery bag in one hand and a heavy look in the other. I blinked, holding the door halfway open. "You're not on the lease," I said. His mouth twitched into the ghost of a smile. "Can I come in anyway?" I didn't move for a moment, then I stepped back. "Take your shoes off." He did, without protest, placing them carefully on the mat. He looked around, like he was stepping into a memory he didn't quite recognize. His eyes landed on the watercolor supplies on the counter, the steaming pot of tea on the stove, the daffodil mug in the sink. "It's quiet," he said. "That's the point." He nodded, still standing awkwardly in the middle of the room. "I brought soup." He held up the grocery bag like a peace offering. "I made my own." I figured, he said softly. "Yours is better anyway." I waited. He set the bag down and rubbed the back of his neck. "I guess I came to say, you were right." I raised an eyebrow. "About?" "All of it." He looked down. "I let her talk to you that way. I thought, if I didn't rock the boat, things would stay manageable." "You mistook silence for peace," I said. "They're not the same." "I know that now." I turned off the burner beneath the kettle. The steam hissed gently, then faded. He looked at me then. "It's not the same without you." It wasn't the same with me. He winced, like the words stung. "She moved out 2 days ago." I paused. "Really?" "Packed everything. Said she needed someone younger, more ambitious, someone who didn't come with baggage." I leaned against the counter. "Did she mean me?" "Probably," he said. Maybe also the mortgage. I let the silence stretch between us. Do you want sympathy? I asked finally. No, he said. I just wanted to see if maybe you'd still let me visit. Depends. On what? On whether you plan to treat this place like a sanctuary or a second chance to repeat old habits. He looked at me, really looked at me for the first time in what felt like years. I want to learn how to be better, not just fix what's broken. I walked over to the cupboard and pulled down a second mug. It didn't match mine. It was plain white, chipped along the rim. George's old camping mug. I filled it with tea, handed it to him without ceremony, and sat at the table. He joined me. We didn't talk much after that. Just sipped in silence, listening to the rain start up again outside. But it wasn't uncomfortable. It wasn't strained. It was the sound of something finally settling into place. Maybe healing doesn't always come in grand gestures. Maybe sometimes it walks through the door with wet hair and a bag of soup. Mark stayed for just under an hour. He didn't overstay, didn't ask to lie down or peek into the other rooms like he used to when he visited in his 20s and still believed I was holding on to family secrets in my cupboards. He just drank his tea slowly, both hands cupped around the mug like he needed to hold something steady. I don't expect forgiveness, he said toward the end. Good, I replied. I don't hand it out like flyers. He nodded, eyes downcast. I told her the house was never hers. You told her too late. I know. The room didn't need much more than that. We weren't in the business of rehashing, not anymore. He finished his tea and stood up. I walked him to the door. He turned back just before stepping outside, his hand on the doorknob. If I want to visit again, you'll call first, I said. And if you say no, then you'll accept that. He looked me in the eye, and this time he didn't flinch. Fair. When the door closed behind him, I didn't sigh with relief or collapse onto the couch. I simply rinsed the mugs, placed mine back in the drying rack, and stared out the window. It wasn't closure, but it was direction. Later that week, I went to my watercolor class. Only 6 of us showed up. 4 women, 1 gentleman named Leon, who wore suspenders and spoke with a stutter so soft it felt like wind brushing your ear. The instructor was named Marla. Kind eyes, strong hands, and the energy of someone who'd been hurt once and turned it into gentleness instead of armor. We painted citrus. I picked a lemon. Mine looked more like a misshapen moon, but I liked it. Marla stopped by my easel and smiled. That's got honesty, she said. That's rare. I almost cried right there. After class, one of the other women, Grace, mid-70s, opinionated, quick with a laugh, asked if I wanted to join them for lunch. We go to Darlene's diner. It's nothing fancy, but neither are we. I said yes. I said it without thinking. The 5 of us squeezed into a red vinyl booth and ordered grilled cheese and tomato soup like it was sacred. We talked about bad knees and worse husbands. We didn't talk about children. I liked that. I became a regular. Every Monday was painting. Every Thursday was lunch. And in between, I filled the apartment with small joys, used books, secondhand pillows, chamomile plants on the balcony. I hung my watercolor lemon in the kitchen. I named it Sour But Survive. One night, while brushing crumbs off the couch cushion, I found the envelope with the wedding photo still tucked inside my journal. I hadn't opened it since the day I labeled it, for later. I opened it. Now, the photo was exactly as I remembered. Me in the background, Mark front and center, Tessa beaming beside him like someone who thought she'd won. I flipped it over and wrote something on the back. I was there. Even when you couldn't see me. I sealed it again. This time, I addressed it to Mark, not to guilt him, not to remind him of what was lost, but to give him the truth, quietly, without expectation. That weekend, I mailed it. No return address, no note, just the photograph and the proof. 2 days later, a text arrived. Got the photo. I never thanked you for everything. I see it now. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. On Sunday morning, Grace knocked on my door with a lemon pie in both hands. Made too much, she said, stepping in like she'd been there 100 times. Hope you like tart. I laughed and set the pie on the table. I painted a lemon last week. Then this is destiny. She poured us both some tea. My kitchen had become the group's unofficial tea hub, and we sat, knees almost touching, the pie between us. "This place suits you," she said. "It does. You think you'll ever go back to the house?" She nodded. I sipped my tea. No, I took what mattered with me. The rest was just weight. Grace leaned back in her chair. "You're one of those quiet, strong types, huh?" "Not always." "Well," she said, cutting the pie, "you are now." The offer on the house closed in less than 30 days. I didn't go back. I didn't walk through one last time or leave behind anything sentimental. I had already taken everything I needed. My peace, my name, my story. They could have the wall. 1 week after closing, I received a thick red envelope in the mail. No return address. Just my name written in unmistakable handwriting. Mark's. The same looped M he had when he was 8. Still visible, despite the years between us. I sat at the kitchen table for a long time before opening it. There was no rush. Closure isn't something you chase. It comes when you're ready to receive it. Inside was a letter and a photograph. The photo was new, taken just a few days prior, judging by the autumn leaves in the background. Mark stood on the steps of a modest duplex, holding a manila envelope with the words rental application written across the top. A quiet smile on his face. Not boastful, not proud, just still. The letter was short. "Mom, you left us with a house. We left you with silence. Only one of us walked away with anything of value. I'm applying to the same complex. Building 3. Thought I'd try being your neighbor, not your tenant. If you're not ready, I'll understand. But if you ever want to share a pie or a painting class, I'm here." Mark. I read it twice, then a third time. Then I placed the photo on the fridge with a magnet that read, "Grow where you are planted." I didn't respond right away. I didn't rush to welcome him into this new world I'd built brick by gentle brick. I simply went about my day, tea at 9, watercolor at 10, soup simmering by noon. But something had shifted again. A new kind of quiet, not the silence of neglect, the silence of possibility. That evening, as the sun poured through my kitchen window in golden waves, I pulled out a fresh sheet of paper and began to write. "Mark, if you want to live near me, you'll learn to live beside me, not over me. This address comes with terms. Mutual respect, no surprises, and no more jokes at my expense. I'm not asking for a different son. I'm asking for the man I know you can still be. You'll find a fresh pie on your doorstep Sunday morning. If you knock on mine, knock gently. Mom." I sealed the letter, walked down to the mailbox with bare feet, and dropped it in. No fanfare, no dramatic score swelling in the background. Just me, on a porch that was mine, in a life I'd earned. Sunday morning came softly, with the scent of baked apples and cinnamon drifting through the hallway. Grace had lent me her pie dish. I'd returned it filled and warm. At 9:12 a.m., I placed the pie on Mark's welcome mat and knocked, just once, gently. I didn't wait for him to open the door. I didn't need to. I trusted the knock would be enough. Back inside, I poured my tea and sat by the window. I opened my sketchbook and began a new painting. This time, not a lemon or an apple or some clumsy imitation of life. This time, I painted a door, open just a crack. Not wide, not inviting everything in, just enough to let the light through. I wish I could tell you that everything wrapped up perfectly, that he became the son I always dreamed of, that we painted together every Monday, that he brought me soup when I sneezed. But healing doesn't come with guarantees. It comes with consistency and time. Mark did move in. He kept his word. He knocked each time. Sometimes I let him in. Sometimes I didn't. And that was okay. He started painting. He brought his own brushes. He never asked to borrow mine. One Monday, after class, he showed me a watercolor he'd done of our old backyard. The swing set long gone, the grass uneven, but the tree still standing. He'd painted it from memory. He didn't ask me to hang it, but I did. Right next to my lemon. Sometimes, people ask me, what changed? I tell them it wasn't one thing. It wasn't the insult at the party. It wasn't the silence afterward. It wasn't the house or the sale or the letter. It was the moment I decided to stop proving I was worth respect and simply started living as though I already had it. I didn't leave because I was angry. I left because I was ready to build a life that didn't rely on crumbs of kindness or borrowed time in someone else's shadow. ready to paint crooked fruit and call it beautiful. Ready to answer a knock on the door, not with fear but with choice. So yes, my daughter-in-law mocked my wrinkles at a party, but what she didn't know, what they didn't know, was that I wore those wrinkles like armor. That each line held a story. That the skin they found so easy to mock had endured years of sacrifice, love, betrayal, and grace. And when I handed them that rental application, it wasn't a punishment. It was a reminder that if they wanted space in my world, they'd have to earn it. Like I did, one door, one box, one breath at a time.